Hi everyone, welcome back to season 3 of Making Waves. So if you haven't seen our first episode yet, make sure to check it out and you can learn about all of our new hosts, including me. For those who are new here, my name is Jonathan and my pronouns are he, him, and his.
My name is Bekah. I use she, her pronouns.
My name is Souksavanh. I use they, them pronouns.
Awesome. So before we begin, we just wanted to do a couple of announcements. We wanted to acknowledge that Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon is located on the traditional homelands of the Marys River or Apinefu Band of Kalapuya. Following the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855, Kalapuya people were forcibly removed to reservations of Western Oregon. Today, living descendants of these people are part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. For Phoenix, Arizona, it is on the traditional homelands of the Acamil, Atham, and the Salt River, Maricopa, Prima Native communities.
Here at Making Waves, we illuminate the experience of Asian and Pacific Islanders here at Oregon State University. We facilitate dialogue surrounding culture and diversity and hope to dive into some of the complexities of the Asian and Pacific Islander experience. Whether this be pop culture, social identity, multiculturalism, or anything among many of the topics we hope to cover. We hope that you can resonate with our stories as well as expose yourself to some of the new ideas and perspectives.
Awesome. And so to start off our second episode, we do have a special guest with us here today, and her name is Daisy.
Yes, my name is Daisy. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a student success peer facilitator at the APCC. I'm a double major in digital communication arts and photography.
Awesome, thanks Daisy. And so the reason she's joining us here today is because she's working on a docuseries called I Am But I Am Not, where she covers issues relating to API identity and intersectionality. And so to keep in mind to keep on the lookout for that whenever we do drop it, and for the interesting conversations and topics she'll be covering in that docuseries as well. And so just as a little introduction to what intersectionality is, we do have the definition right here. So Daisy?
Yes. So this is pulled from Merriam-Webster. The definition of intersectionality is the complex and cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, and classism, combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized individuals or groups.
And so I guess really reflecting on like that intersectionality, like where do you think was the most difficult or like difficult moments, experiencing that you've experienced like with that intersecting identity?
I can start off. The like first moment that I think of when I think about this question is a conversation that I had with my grandfather. And my grandpa is kind of like the patriarch of the family. He's like, because in Vietnamese culture it's like very patriarchal and it's very family oriented, and it's like very much like you have to respect your elders, like their word is like absolute, at least that's how I feel. And it's just like sometimes I think about like how when I was like growing up and like me and my cousins would like go over to our grandfather's house to like visit. It's like, okay, girls go over here and you do your thing and boys do this thing. And that's like kind of like the first feeling that I had like of like, oh, I'm aware of my gender and I'm also aware of my race. And I felt like especially as I grew up, like you begin to see like adults treat you differently based on your gender, and then other people treat you differently because of your race as well. So that was like hard for me to view myself as like there's already these expectations of me because of my race and gender. I guess that's the first moment I can think of. It's not really that specific, I guess.
I think for me, again with the interesting perspective of like me growing up not feeling like the minority, and having growing up with people with the same culture. It's crazy because even though we have like similar like practices or culture and lifestyle, the fact that again we are like we do have different races play into so many different aspects to that intersectionality. Like, yes, I may be Filipino, but on top of that Filipino culture, there is also this Hawaiian local culture too. Like, I don't know if you guys hear this a lot, but like we do coin the term like sharing aloha and whatsoever. Like, that's just like an underlying like thing that we all share on top of like our own individual cultures as well. And again, it plays into like that idea of like a melting pot. Like, even though we have like our own different like all we all have our differences, it just easily connects into this same culture, and we all fit in and have that like same connection and experience regardless of like the differences. And I one main thing I do want to point out too is like the pidgin. You ever heard of like how like people from Hawaii, like they speak pidgin or like have like this broken English type of way of talking? It's interesting because on top of like the broken English that we have, you have different like terminology and like phrases and sayings that come from different cultures. Like, how do I say this? Like we have a lot of like Japanese terms in there also, and phrases that we used within our pidgin language, on top of like Filipino. It's hard to explain, but yeah, just the fact that our languages are even like compiled into one when we all have like the same thing and using the same different like we have our different languages and compiling it into like our broken English is another form of like that intersectionality, I think, and that melting pot that we all share. And so it really is, again, the difficult moment was for me especially is just coming here in the mainland and really feeling that repercussion of how different I really am compared to everybody else here. And so yeah, that would be like the biggest culture shock for me.
Like Daisy, I think the most prominent two would be racism and sexism. Obviously, like, I was so looked physically different than everyone around me that I got like, they weren't even like, I knew they weren't intentional, but it's the microaggression kind of comments where they're like, oh, you look so like Asian today. Like, I don't know what that means. Don't I look Asian all the time? Or I've gotten a comment once, we're supposed to do like these reflective letters, and like they were just supposed to be like nice comments to people, and someone had like wrote on like my note, they're like, oh, you're my favorite Asian. I was like, we're in a room of white people, I'm the only Asian person. Like, I don't know what that, I didn't know how to take that. I was actually kind of hurt by that because I was like, you couldn't think of anything else to say other than the way I physically look, and I can't change that. So with that, I also get comments of like they're kind of gross, but they're like, the comments were like, oh, you're so like submissive, you're so quiet. Like, I've gotten comments like that a lot, and that falls into that like stereotype of like small Asian women are like these like sexual fantasies that are submissive, and like it's just so disgusting. And I think those two are very prevalent in my life. But with classism, I don't feel like it's as prevalent, but I think in a way I kind of am lucky, I guess, because my parents, being white, have that privilege, and when I'm with them, I don't feel like my parents are going to be discriminated against. I don't have that fear for them. I think they have that fear more for me and my sister. For example, like when Corona broke out and there were all those horrible comments about the Chinese virus, and now everyone that was Asian was just automatically associated with that, and people were feared for their parents and themselves. I didn't feel that way, and in that sense I'm lucky, and they don't have that stereotype where they are immigrants and they are illegal and they have to work hard. Like, not that my parents don't work hard, but yeah, I just don't feel like classism shows up as much in my life.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. Like, can we expand more on that thought if we have time? Because it's so important. Like, right? One, I think it's silenced for a reason. And it plays into the idea that, like, Asian people fit into Western society, when it's like, no, people are literally attacking our relatives, for being Asian because of the rhetoric that is coming from the 45th president, you know? And, like, people are dying, they're getting harmed, having to go to the hospital because of violence that white supremacists are doing against our families that look like us. So I think that's really important. But to go back onto the difficult moments that I experienced with my intersecting identities, I think, like, kind of going off of like what Bekah was saying, in different ways of, like, I've had even family members, because as I mentioned, I grew up with more of, like, my Dinesh side, and it was like until I was like 5 where we stopped talking or separated from my Laotian side because of, like, safety reasons, that I wasn't associated with it. But then, like, now looking back, not that family members knew that microaggressions might have been done to us specifically as, like, Asian identifying people. It's me, and my 2 siblings, my brother and sister, and I think we're the only ones in our family that are part Laotian or part Asian. And one time, it was so weird, and I'm not gonna say how they're related to me, but we were sitting down and, like, out of nowhere, because they watch a lot of, like, crime shows or, like, those action-based shows, and how Asian people are depicted within those, like, as, like, the criminals or, like, the bad guys. One time, like, a family member was like, oh, you just really need to be careful around Asian people. Of everyone in our whole family, it was like that was directed toward us, or, like, said to us as Laotian Asian people, like, being part Dene and Laotian. And of course it's like, well, you didn't grow up with your Laotian side, so, like, we consider you Dene. And it's like, well, you can't separate me from my identity like that. And so, like, the way that you talked about Asian folks is how you talk about me. And it was a very real conversation that we had, and our relationship is more like joking, so we're like, what did you mean by that? And, like, kind of, like, messing with them and, like, kind of saying, like, that was messed up. So hopefully they learned from that experience. But yeah, like, stuff like that comes up, and, like, people try to play it off as cool or as nice or, like, as a compliment, when it's, like, a backhanded compliment. And it's like, well, you're not that type of Asian person. You're, like, a nice Asian person. And it's like, you don't get to do that to my community. Even though, like, I have been, like, separated in that way, I don't think I consider myself separated. You know, like, if you talk about our community, it's about all of us. Like, as we were mentioning, the harm that has been done to our Asian relatives because of, like, the rhetoric that the 45th president was saying, it affects us all. It doesn't just affect some of us. And, like, the concept that, like, Kamala Harris is now our vice president, she is also Asian American, and so it's like it uplifts us all. So, like, this connection and ties of, like, because you aren't, because I'm Laotian and Jonathan is like Filipino or Filipinx, doesn't mean like the harms against Asianness affect us different, or like it, like the harm that might happen to Filipinx or Laotian people, it affects us both equally, you know, like we are one community. And I think like the intersection, and people, I don't think people understand like how intersectionality works, of like they like to separate you because that's all America is like trying to put labels onto people. So especially multiracial people, it's like, well, you can experience this racism if you're part this, you know, or like you can't experience, like I've gotten a lot of like people think I'm like white passing, and I don't think I'm white passing. I'm pretty proud. And so like this idea of like, oh, I'm white passing because I'm Asian, and it's like, no, I don't think I'm white passing in general. And two, it's like this labeling of like, because people say I am white passing, that I don't feel the harm that has been done to Native people, or like vice versa, of like, because I am brown, people don't think that the harm that has been done to Asian people affect me too. And it's like, we need to stop that rhetoric somehow, because it does affect me.
What do you think are some things we could do, I guess, or like us within the Asian community, that we could do to move towards that direction?
Okay, so one, I think as a Asian community, and I've had this conversation actually yesterday with one of my friends, that was really good, about how we get to pick and choose who and who is not Asian when it's convenient for us, and thinking about like, right, and that plays a lot within colorism and racism. So like the idea that Desi people, for example, they're a part of the Asian American community, which is the region of like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And oftentimes it's like we exclude it for a specific reason, or include it for a specific reason when it's to our benefit. When it's like we can't be playing that game anymore. We just have to accept we have them in our community, you know? Or like even when we think about Asianness in general, people think automatically China, to be honest. Like that, right? That's the first thought when people think Asian. Or like when someone's speaking an Asian language, it resorts to Chinese first. For a lot of reasons that American society just likes, I think, is just ignorant in some ways, that like they don't want to understand how complex and diverse Asia is, and Asian identity is, that it's like it doesn't affect them like it affects us, right? So I think it's important to understand that globally and contextually, and then for us as a API community is like the inclusivity of like how diverse API is. Like we just think when we say API, I know some people already have like visions or an image of what an API person looks like, right? Like, and that's the bias that is built in because of how the structure is. And so I want to like challenge our community to like think about who is in our community, how we support our community, and what have we been doing to exclude people to heal. Like not in a way to continue excluding, but in a way to include them into the conversation, include them in their experiences as Asian American people, Asian people. Those are just some thoughts and ideas for now. I feel like I could just go on and on about this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, yeah, and I think I want to bring up an important topic too, and something that you brought up, like I learned from you, is definitely that whole idea of blood quantum. Again, going back to like, and I really believe that this is something that a lot of people and our viewers, if you are listening, should know about and really, really absorb, is this idea of blood quantum. That there are like, and these are like conversations I've had with like, people and with like friends as well, that again, blood quantum, it just as a simplification is like, if I say that like if I'm multiracial, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm 75% this, 25% that, or I'm 50% this, 10% this, and like the fact that you're quantifying or putting percentages on your identity and your ethnicity is already, I believe, a toxic thing, because it's yeah, you're like basically giving yourself a number of like how much you connect to that identity. And for the folks that are, yeah, exactly, no, just because I'm 10% this doesn't mean I'm only 10% like, yeah, Filipino. No, I'm 100% Filipino because I have that identity ingrained in me. And just as an example, like I think this is a prevalent thing too in Hawaii, and for for Native Americans as well, that in Hawaii, your how much you're connected or how much you are Native Hawaiian by blood is what determines your connections to, like, if you can go to like the private Hawaiian schools like Kamehameha schools and other schools, they quantify your blood. And the fact that no, because like I have only 10% Hawaiian this, I'm not allowed to those resources. And that's why we still have a bunch of like Native Hawaiians living homeless or on the beach and things like that, like just people without resources when they deserve to have those resources provided by our government. And so just another food for thought on like that type of intersectionality and how that plays in that toxicity in our government. So
Yeah, no, for sure. And like, just to kind of clarify for the audience, because I've done like a presentation for the staff here, is like blood quantum, is a tactic specifically used for indigenous people, but I feel like it's adopted and it's a colonial tool, and we see this around the world, how people quantify identity. And so to be enrolled into like
I think that's all the time we have for today, but again, thank you for sharing your own personal experiences and ideas on this very important and touchy subject, but again, something that everybody needs to hear and ponder about on their own identity. And again, to keep an eye out for Daisy's docuseries, I Am Not, and for the conversations and ideas that she'll be expanding in that docuseries as well. Any last words from you too, Daisy?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for having me. And for sure, the trailer is actually out. I don't know how I can get the link out, but there's definitely a trailer. So
click on the link below. I'm gonna make it a thing.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, and then keep an eye out for our uploads for our next episode as well, and our first episode if you haven't checked it out yet. So yeah, again, thank you. I'll see you guys. Bye.